What's up, guys? In the last video, we worked on improving our heads-up display by adding this progress bar, which I think is pretty sweet. So in this video, we're now going to create our end screen. So we need an end HTML and we need an end JavaScript file. So in our end HTML, obviously, we'll stub out HTML5 boilerplate. We'll say congrats is the title. And we've done this in the past 2 pages, so I'm just going to kind of copy this in here as well. Inside of the body, we're going to have a container, and then we're going to have the page is going to be ID of end here, and then flex center, flex column. So let's navigate. Actually, let's first put something in there. Hey or hello, whatever. And after we answer all of our questions, so 1, 2, and 3, this should now take us to a working hello page here, or excuse me, end page, and we want to include the CSS, app CSS, so that this looks a little bit better. There we go. And what do we need now? We'll need a reference to our script tag, so script source equals app, or excuse me, end JS. And I think we're ready to go. So let's start by stubbing out what all is going to be inside of this end HTML page. And we're going to start with an H1 here that has an ID of final score. And it's going to be blank to start, or we can just set it at 0 for display purposes. And then we're going to have a form. So what this is for the user to submit their score if they want to. So we don't need an action here because we're going to handle that ourselves. And we're going to have an input of type text, and it's going to have a name of username, an ID of username as well, and then a place holder of username. All right, so we should see a little tiny form there. We're going to have to make this work a little bit better later on, so we will. Then we'll have a button with a type of submit, and we're going to give this a class of button. So since we already have that class that we used before, this is going to go ahead and style up pretty nice. Once we say give this a save text, it should look like what we expect. All right, so it looks pretty good. All right, and a few other things we need in here. This is we need an ID because this is the save score button that we're going to need to get a reference to. Then on click, we're going to set the on click handler inside of the HTML, and it's going to call a function called save high score and pass in the event. All right, and I think this will just give us an error for now since we don't have that defined, that function defined. Yeah, so it threw an error real quick, and then it went ahead and navigated to this, which is what forms do by default. So we'll talk about that in a second. All right, so that's our form, and then we're going to have 2 anchor tag buttons to one to play the game again, and then another one to go home. So these are just anchor tags with a class of button, and then they tell it where to go basically. So this is going to line up pretty well, I think, here. And so the only thing we're missing is styling this this input here. Now I could create in a CSS file for the end screen, but I'm just going to use our app CSS because these are not really specific to the end screen. This is things that would be used on any screen that needed a form basically. So that's why we're going to keep it inside of the app CSS. So let's open that up, and what I want to do is grab any form and say width is going to be 100%, which is fine. This is going to be a display flex. And then set the flex direction to column. So this is going to stack everything on top of each other, which is what I want. And then set the flex, set the align items to center. So this is going to center everything. Now we need to style the input form. So we're going to grab input, and we'll say give it a little margin bottom, give a little space there. We'll say, let's see, width is going to be 20 rem, so this should match the width of the buttons. The padding is going to be 1.5 rem, give it some space there. All right, starting to look a little bit better. Font size is going to be 1.8 rem to match the size of the buttons as well. the border, we're actually going to take the border away. So we're going to say border none, and then we'll do a box shadow of 0, 0.0, or excuse me, 0, 0.1 rem, 1.4 rem, 0, and then RGBA 86, 185, 235, and 0.5 as the opacity. So we've seen that before as well. So this is going to give a little bit of box shadow around here. That looks a little bit different than what I thought this should look like. Let's compare it to here. So let's get through to the end screen. This should be 0.5 for the opacity there. That looks better. So that looks pretty good. I don't like how dark that placeholder text is, so I'm going to style that. So you can grab that by doing input and then double colon placeholder. And I just want to change it to a lighter color, so I'm going to use AAA, which will be a pretty light gray there to kind of take some of that away. So what we're also going to do now with our button, we've got a button disabled stuff here. So notice as hover on here, save is hovering, and it makes you think that you can click on it, but we shouldn't let the user click until there's something in the text. So I'm going to start, or actually let's do two things. Let's go ahead and move over to our end screen, and then we'll talk about the disabledness. So let's grab, or actually, sorry, I'm kind of stumbling around here. We've already said save high score is going to be a function. Let's go ahead and define that just so we can kind of see what happens when a user clicks. So we're going to get the event E, and I can console log here. I clicked the save button. And so let's save this. Let's refresh. Let's click save, and you'll probably see something a little weird. Save. You saw that log pop up here maybe for a second, and then it goes away. So forms by default will go ahead and submit to a new page with those form properties as query parameters at the top. So what we want to do is we want to do e.prevent default. So this will prevent the form from taking its default action, which is to then post to a different page. So clicking save now should be okay. It'll just log out, and then I can click this as many times as I want. All right. So this is letting me click, but I don't want to be able to click unless somebody has typed in here. So what I'll do is in our end HTML, I'll come down to our button, and I'll set it to disabled by default. All right, so now I can't click on it, and notice that not click allowed hover state, which is nice. Inside of our JavaScript now, I want to get a reference to the input text, so the username text. So get ID username, that'll give me a reference to it. And then I want to add an event listener for key up. And you might try doing change. Change as an event listener for inputs doesn't probably do exactly what you expect. It really only triggers when you kind of navigate into and away from your input. It doesn't give you a change on every character that you type in, for example. So that's where key up comes in. So just as a test, we can log out every time we key up. Let's do username input dot value. All right, so this should, semicolons go at the end of a line. Save that. And as we type here, now we should see, username input. Just username, I think is what I went with. So username right there. And if I start typing, we should see it pop up over here, which is good. So now we can decide whether or not to disable the save score button based on the input that's in here. So let's get the save score button. Let's see what we called it. Save score button is what we called it. Save score button. All right. And we're going to say save score button disabled, not dispatch, disabled equals, and we're going to disable it if there's no username input or username value. If there's nothing typed in there, if it's falsy, and falsy could be empty string, undefined, things like that. So if there's nothing in there, then set the button to disabled. If there is something there, then that will enable the button for us to submit. So we should see, to start off, this is disabled. That's good. we come in here and type, and now this is enabled and we can click on it to save, which is great. So we're going to need to do a couple of things in here. One is in the game HTML, or excuse me, game.js, when we end the game, we want to save off the player score so that we can access it in the end screen. So what this is going to look like is we'll use local storage, and we're going to set an item, and we're just going to set this with a key of most recent score, and we're going to save score into that value. All right, so that works. And then in our end screen, now we want to get, when we load up, we want to get that score. So we'll say const most recent score equals local storage get item. So we want to get something out of local storage, and we want to get the most recent score. And then we want to update this score text. So this score text is in our end HTML the final score. So let's get a reference to that with get ID, final score. And we can say final score, enter text equals most recent score. All right. So right now, by default, let's get rid of the 0 by default and come over to our end screen. So the way you can look at local storage is if you come into your Chrome Developer Tools, you can open up the Application tab, look at local storage, and I've already got some of this stuff saved from the past, but if I change this to 10 as my most recent score, and let me get rid of a couple of these things so that we'll kind of be starting from scratch. If I set most recent score to 10 and refresh, it's going to pull 10 from the recent score. Now you can come in and you can add this key value pair yourself, or what we should do is come into our game page and let's play the game real quick. So let's get a higher score than 10. So script source, I think is right. So that's 10. Then where do we put JavaScript is in a script tag. So that's 20. And then let's do an alert. So this should give us a score of 30 in here. Notice that updated, and then it pulled it in our end screen right here, which is pretty sweet. So that's going to do it for this video. We're going to kind of split this topic in two. So right now we're able to get the high score from the game. We're able to display it, and we're able to handle when a user clicks on the save button. Now in the next video, we'll take a few minutes to work with saving the high scores in local storage and determining whether or not the score is valid for a high score, whether or not it's high enough. And then later on, we'll do the high score screen to pull those scores out. So that's going to do it for this video, and we'll finish up handling the score stuff in the next one.